March 2012, and a group of musicians has gathered in County Durham to record a piece of music for the first time.
Today is wonderful because it's been a combination of the work of one of our creative writing tutors, Gordon Phillips, who wrote some poems inspired by the Pitman Painters' work, the Ashington Group, publicised, of course, by Lee Hall in his famous play, Pitman Painters. And these poems have been set to music by Paul Beck, who's also been a WEA tutor. And we brought together singers from a couple of Durham choirs, plus some instrumentalists from a community orchestra called the Cobwebs Orchestra from the North region.
It is an honour, really. So it's thrilling to actually hear how Paul Beck, the composer, has actually put the piece together, because I've only heard the instrumental version, and now I'm hearing the words coming together with the music.
But to fully understand the significance of this piece of music, we need first to explore life in the northeast of England 100 years before. At the turn of the 20th century, Britain was in the grip of a storm of social change. The empire had grown rich, thanks to the ingenuity and back-breaking labour of its people. And now, those people wanted a share in the good times.
Well, North East was dependent on very heavy industries of coal, steel making, shipbuilding, that kind of thing. Long working hours, very tough, physically demanding jobs. Not a lot of outlets for things to do in their leisure times. People's educational opportunities were so limited that unless you followed a self-help method of developing your own educational courses, weekend schools, all that kind of thing, then there was very little else you could get out of the established education system. Because the system was so biased towards people who were well off, and it tended to discard working class people at the age of 9, 10, 11, that sort of age range.
They'd got elementary schools as a result of the Forster Act of 1870, and that was fine. There was a good coverage of elementary education in the northeast of England. There'd been some education before that of an elementary type. The church schools, of course, had been very important. There were some enlightened employers who'd set up educational activities for children in their factories. Armstrong, for instance, had got schools going in Elswick, and he got one at Ridsdale, where he had an ironworks from about 1864 onwards. So there were facilities like that. But for going on, you'd either got to get into a grammar school, and after 1902 there were more state-type grammar schools, but that had to be paid for. And of course, people didn't go in for that. And as far as adult education was concerned, there'd been mechanics institutes, and some of those continued into the 20th century. But it was very hit-y-missy where you were, and it was very limited. And of course, the idea of working men going to universities was just off the scale, as it was for women until the very latter end of the 19th century.
And it was into this mix of poverty, hardship, and newfound confidence that a new educational organisation emerged.
According to folklore in the WEA, there was an afternoon in the kitchen of Albert and Frances Mansbridge, which they discussed setting up an educational association. And in order to get it off the ground, Frances lent Albert 2 and 6 out of her housekeeping to do, I suppose, the initial postage costs. The reality was that there had been a lot more preparation behind that. Albert Mansbridge and I imagine Frances have been involved in education through cooperative societies and in various other settings that have brought Albert into contact with people in universities, in the Church of England, in the trade unions. And he had the idea that if you could bring together people who were operating in their own separate corners, they would find they had a lot in common around their aims for working class education, or at least breaking down the barriers to that access to education.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that the North East would be fertile ground for an organisation like the WEA. But it took a couple of false starts before the movement took off in the region.
One of the reasons for that was that there'd been an explosion of interest in adult education, particularly in the mining communities, in the 1880s. Thousands of miners had gone to adult education lectures and classes, but what they'd found was that the kind of education that was on offer was a view of economics, particularly, that suited the employers, and the education was used, or the view of economics promoted through that adult learning was used to justify things like wage cuts during periods of trade depression.
And as Britain descended into the Great Depression of the 1930s, the WEA wrote itself into the history books of the North East and the art world. A WEA art class from Ashington in Northumberland, comprised mainly of supposedly uneducated miners, began producing artworks that captured the hearts and imaginations of Britain's cultural elite, and which today sell all over the world.
The picture of art in England to any outsider that hadn't had any instruction at all was a real puzzle, was chaotic. So we thought, well, we'd subject ourselves to that. We'd ask somebody from King's College to come out and talk to us about modern art. We insisted it had to be modern art. So they sent out Robert Lyon, who was then master of painting at King's College. We met in an old room in the old YMCA, which was a wooden hut from the First World War, lit by an electric light globe and heated by a little stove in the middle of the room. We sat round this in the gloaming. He was in the middle, and we in a ring round him, and we talked, and he let us talk, and he talked, and we talked, and we talked, and he just didn't say much, went away. He could say, and he was quite certain that any academic approach was going to be hopeless with us. We weren't the sort of material to work on that way. He decided to make his own approach, and that was first to try and do a thing, and by trying to do it you would probably begin to understand the artist and the problems of the artist. And that was how this class started.
I might add, at that time, the WEA, it was all theory.
Whitehall said no, it hadn't to be, nothing which could be possibly interpreted as being of any use for making a living could be taught. Only those things which were cultural, which meant words. And we bumped the same thing when we started this art group. But Robert Lyon got round it somehow. I don't know how, but he did.
100 years after the WEA was formed, the story of the Pitman Painters has been turned into a play that's been performed both at the Royal National Theatre and on Broadway. And it's that love of education, for education's sake, that still defines the WEA today.
An awful lot of older people haven't had the chance to take up art, and it's amazing. Many of them have got talents that are hidden, and you know, they haven't got the confidence at the beginning, but then they find that they have a talent, and some of them produce marvellous work, and it also benefits in their family life. I mean, many grandparents now looking after the grandchildren during the day, and I know of one person that her two grandchildren have followed in art for an occupation, and it was really just through her giving them information and they have benefited as well. So, I mean, there's an awful lot of talent there that they've never had the opportunity to show it.
Over the years, WEA branch courses have diversified. As well as traditional subjects like history, English literature and art, you can study anything from forensic science and woodland management to African drumming, yoga and Tai Chi. The 1970s and 80s saw new courses specifically for women returning to learning under the New Opportunities for Women banner. Almost 2,000 participants and 250 voluntary and community organisations have benefited from an initiative by the WEA North Eastern region to help people manage mental health problems. And citizenship programmes like working with local communities have helped parents get involved in their children's schools, while supporting ethnic minority groups to address issues of access while becoming more involved in the democratic process.
We had a trip to London Parliament, and this is a very good experience for me and my other colleagues as well. And this is the first time I've been in London and Parliament, see the Parliament, and this is a very good experience. Give me more confidence now. Now I know how to visit London and different places. Before I haven't had the confidence, but after that visit, give me more confidence because I like to traveling and learning new things and skills. And all my family and friends, they amazed and shocked how we here for 30 years we never been in Parliament, and how for that short period of time you've been in London. This is a very good experience. Definitely want to go and do that kind of trips more.